Tonight we have something a little different. We have all three of us here. We have a company that makes the panel, we have my electrician, and we have me, all of us from Connecticut. But everything we're talking about here applies to pretty much anyone in North America. And Corrigan, I'm going to hand it off to you. Maybe you do market to Canada as well, all in North America?
Right now we are in the US, Canada, and Puerto Rico are our next territories that we'll be working to get into.
And it's just great to have you here tonight, and that we were able to find a contractor, an electrician who was able to not just do this, but had much experience with both EV charging installation and span panel charging. So I've set the table for you, Corrigan. Take it away. Thank you again for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate everyone for joining in tonight and having me here to go through this with you. As Paul mentioned, I'm a Connecticut native, so I grew up in Essex on the shoreline. Moved out of state for a while, working for a few different architectural lighting companies. And then when I joined Span about a year ago, I was able to pick where I could live. So I moved back to Connecticut in the West Hartford area. So excited to be here with the home state folks. Little bit of the agenda of what I'll go through, kind of who is Span, what is the company vision, the home energy landscape, really why did Span come to exist today? What does Span do? Who should get Span or should consider get Span? And how do you get Span, most importantly, if interested? So company overview. Span was founded in 2018 by the former head of the Powerwall team at Tesla, Art Rao. And he brought over a few of the engineers from his team. So the core team for the first year was about 4 engineers really doing grunt work in someone's basement, right? Figuring out what to do with the panel. Since then, we've launched 2 generations of our panel. So we're already on our 2nd generation panel. And in Q4 of last year, we launched our compatible companion EV charger. So it's been a great journey for Span. We've grown like crazy. It's been really good to see this take off all the way from California through Connecticut and Maine, and seeing the different nuances of the regions and how they take on like a product like this. But obviously with that, in terms of the energy and solar space, many companies are startups or young companies. In the electrical space, we are a relatively new company, right? You think of the typical painting manufacturers. If you walk down to your basement, Eaton, Siemens, Murray, Square D, they've been around for a number of years, right? Where we're kind of the newer company on the block. We have some pretty major investors, right? We had some announcements come out late last year that we met our Series B for funding. Big green building investment firm Fifth Wall, Wellington Management, Amazon Alexa Fund, to name a few. That just kind of shows the backing and those who have believed in the company. If anybody read about CES or was lucky to go to CES in Vegas last week, which is the Consumer Electronics Show, we were actually in the Amazon booth, which was pretty cool to see how all those integrations work with our panel. In terms of those who have purchased our product and done some different videos, who we've worked with as friends of Span, providing the panels to them. There's a great bit of YouTube content out there. The likes of the What's Inside family is a new one. Jonathan Scott from HGTV, Ben Sullins, Matt Farrell, Matt Reisinger. Locally, NS Builders. He's a local builder up in the Boston area doing content. They're putting a Span panel into one of their projects. Have kind of taken the product and given their very open, honest opinion on it. Most of it's very good. Obviously, as we grow, we take a lot of those nuances to heart in areas where we want to grow. Which is a really good thing being a smaller company. We take a lot of that feedback very seriously, and there's a lot more access to us to talk about things that are going on with the panel and areas where we can improve it and so forth. And then in terms of awards, last year was our first year at the Builder Show. We won 2 best ofs, which is kind of unheard of. This year at the Builder Show, which is actually in 2 weeks, we're up for another 2 best of with the same product, our Span panel and our EV charger. So it's pretty exciting time as we go to these shows, and we are a standout product.
Corrigan, before you advance that slide, folks should notice we have other people who own this panel, like Matt Farrell, right on here with us tonight, which is an extra special treat for the Q&A section at the end. It's great to have, it sounds like, multiple owners of your product right here tonight. So that should really help us out later on in the presentation for the Span panel discussion, as well as the open Q&A afterward.
Of course. So talk a little about what Span is, where we're at today as a company. Why did span come to be, right? You look at all the factors going on in the world today. It's a dramatic shift in how homeowners are looking at their energy usage, what they're doing in and around their homes, and how to tailor that. I think we're in a pretty unique position in the Northeast. I'm sure we've all read about National Grid, Eversource, UI 40% rate hikes, where you say, how do I tailor my home so that my bill does not experience that rate hike at such an extreme condition, right? We get hot, humid summers. If you have central air, that's going to be a big ticket item on your electric bill. So what are the things going on to enable better usage of your bill and save you some money if you can over time? First off, EVs, right? I don't think there's a car commercial today that is a internal combustion engine. I think they're all electric vehicles. That growth is going to continue. And with the vehicle to X, what we call it, or vehicle to home, powering your home with your car, we're going to see even bigger growth there. Residential solar alone is going to have big growth. I'm sure we've all seen solar trucks in our neighborhoods, right? There have been a number of solar sales reps through all the neighborhoods in West Hartford where I live. I personally am getting solar this spring, which I'm pretty excited about, to kind of curtail that energy bill. And we're going to see that continue to grow. And as the battery manufacturers kind of stabilize their supply chain, and like we said, that new nuance of car batteries powering home, that growth is going to continue to grow. And SPAN is there to enable better usage of all of these things, right? Today, everything goes back to an analog piece of equipment, which is really just an on-off switch, but it should really be the brain of your home. And we'll get into that in a little bit further. And overall, when we look at the nation holistically, there's over 50 million homes that need an electrical panel upgrade. And this is not an item like your Nest thermostat that you're touching day in and day out. Most homeowners don't necessarily understand. And even from my standpoint, I came from the electrical industry on the lighting side. I didn't know the nuances with electrical panels of what I could and couldn't add and the exact limitations there as you want to electrify. And when we talk about that electrification, right? Electric homes are becoming a bigger and bigger trend. Even on the builder side, they're trying to remove those natural gas or fossil fuel based homes and go all electric. We're really there to enable, the better adoption of mini splits of solar and battery of electrical vehicle chargers. And we're seeing this grow more and more. Whether or not you're getting it today, maybe you're considering it in the future. And that's something that's really interesting that we're trying to tie into for those homeowners. And when we talk about the SPAN home and what that looks like, again, we're trying to enable the rapid adoption of these things. So we look at a home like this that has solar, battery, maybe generator. They're all going to essentially a central hub of your home. Right now, you have a lot of smart devices in your home, most likely. We want to make a true smart home versus smart devices, right? So feeding in Lutron devices into your panel, your mini splits, your Philips Hue powered lights back into another smart device to enable these things further, whether it's to curtail energy bills, get insights into your home, and just control them holistically. And one of the interesting things about the SPAN panel is you have to have a UL listing, right? Underwriter's Laboratory for electrical panels, which we have. We also have a UL listing for an energy management system. That means that we can tie in different integrations like solar and battery, and like solar and battery, as well as EV charging, and do different load sheddings so that homeowners have a better experience with these devices as they add them. So what does SPAN do? Anyone with their phone out can go and scan these QR codes to kind of take a look at the SPAN home demo app. If anybody hasn't done that today, I would definitely recommend kind of following along as I go through the next few slides, and we can take a look at what that app looks like and how you're really going to have control over your app and your panel. As great as our panel looks, LED tape lights in there, you're going to be doing most of the work with SPAN through your phone, which is a really interesting use case versus a typical panel today. So when we look at the home screen, you're going to understand if you have solar and battery, right? If you just have grid, you're just going to have that purple middle section where energy is flowing through your home, where it's coming from, and where you're storing it or sending it back to the grid. And that's a pretty interesting use case because today you'll be able to, if you have that, really balance it against, say, your solar edge or your Tesla solar system to ensure that what you're registering with your solar utility company is matching what's actually flowing through your panel. You can also tap onto the sun, the grid, the battery to get those deeper level of insights to understand how much energy you're using, what's covered by solar down to the circuit level, or in your battery, do different load shedding, which we'll get into in a little bit. But this is a great interface, and you can do a simulated home within the App Store. And it's a pretty interesting way to get a firsthand experience of what it would be like to own a SPAN panel. When we talk about the circuit level data, right? So I mentioned that SPAN has an energy management listing. So we use off-the-shelf breakers that you would normally have in your traditional panel today. We talk at the relay level in our panel, which essentially means we can determine at the circuit level how much energy you're using down to the watt, kilowatt hour percentage in your home. So we talk about electric bills going up by 40%. You're probably going to want to know where you're using the most electricity within your home and maybe tailor usage or do different things to automatically shift circuits on and off as needed. So you get that different level of view, that really granular level of view at the circuit level, day, week, month, year, how much energy you're using. So say you go from May to June, the basement is on, you look at it and you say, wow, I had a huge spike there. Well, maybe the kids are out of school for the summer and the Xbox TV lights haven't turned off in weeks. It's a pretty good use case there. You also have on-off control. Tons of different use cases there that as homeowners, I'm sure we've all been through. Like I said, I live in West Hartford, a house built in 1953. My front doorbell and my oven are on the same circuit. So when I was updating my doorbell, it took me about 30 minutes to figure out which circuit I needed to flip off in order to hardwire a new doorbell. First home, second home, you don't want certain outlets or lights to be used by renters. Turn those on and off as needed when you're there or not there. So there's a lot of different use cases for why you would want to monitor things at the circuit level and then also have control of circuits on off at the circuit level. And one of the interesting things also that we do is tying in with Amazon Alexa. You can actually set up routines where you could schedule circuits to turn on and off throughout different times during the day. So if you think of time of use rates in Connecticut, you could have certain things shed at certain times through your Amazon Alexa routine settings. That's how we do it today. We're looking at different ways to enable that with a little bit more detail, but right now we're utilizing Amazon Alexa just as a really good use case because there may be other things in the home that are already connected in with that. And when we talk about backup with SPAN, solar and battery is a growing installation in the Northeast, right? I'll say that versus California, it's still very far behind the average number of homes that have that. But if you have solar and if you have battery, you're in a way very limited for the investment that you're making. So oftentimes when you have a backup battery solution, Solar Edge Energy Bank, LG Chem battery, Tesla Powerwall, you're limited in what you can back up and when. Most likely you will have a critical loads panel that has 6 or 12 circuits, and those are what you're going to have backed up. But we live in New England. We have outages in the winter. We have outages in the summer. So most likely you're going to want different things backed up during those different seasons. So rather than a 6 or 12 circuit critical loads panel, SPAN turns into your virtual critical loads panel so that during an outage, you have 3 buckets that you can drop those circuits into: must have, nice to have, non-essential. At any point in time during an outage, you can move those circuits within those 3 buckets. So you can see here on the screen in this little video caption we have here, you can see the day, the hour, the minutes changing as you move circuits, right? So not only is it an insane level of detail for how much time you have left on your battery, but also you have ultimate flexibility as things change, family changes, house changes of what you want backed up and when. And SPAN will also do automatic load shedding. So we'll always shed the non-essential circuits for you. At 50% battery life, we will shed the nice to have circuits for you. And when you're doing your installation, if there's certain circuits you never want shed, say your kids also have access to this, your installer can tag things as non-sheddable, the same as you can tag them as sheddable, so that you have an extra level of security as you see fit. And for us in the Northeast, like I mentioned, solar and battery is growing. This is something we're looking to add in with whole home generators as well. Today, you can do manual load shedding in your home app if you have a whole home generator. We're working to build in some of that software. It's just a little bit different. The computer or the gateway of a battery versus the technology that is in a generator. But we have some different studies that we've done that we essentially can extend your battery life by about 40%, which also means if you're looking at multiple batteries, maybe you need 2 instead of 3, 1 instead of 2, which is a huge cost savings. So there's a lot of different areas within the solar and battery world where SPAN is a big investment, but it's actually in some cases a smaller investment than what you would have to do to right size or get the best use out of your battery backup solution. And in the case of generators, you can really right size your whole home generator. Maybe you don't need that really big generator. You can get a smaller size that's a little bit less costly. But probably something you guys are all interested in, as this is the EV Club of Connecticut, SPAN and EV chargers. So we do a few different things in terms of EV charging today. If you have a SPAN panel, no matter if it's a Tesla wall connector, a juice box charger, a SPAN EV charger, anyone gets a full level 2 charge. And what I mean by that is today, to get a full level 2 charge, you would need a 60 amp breaker for your 48 amp level 2 car charger. If you have 100 amp service, if you have 200 amp service, you may not have room for that full 60 amp breaker to go in, which means you've just invested, in some cases, high dollar values for your EV, but you have to derate your charger or use a 240 volt plug-in, which can take, depending on your scenario, up to 3 days to charge your car, which is not the experience you want after you've invested a nice chunk of change into your EV. So how do we do this? Because we're an energy management system, the 60 amp breaker does not need to be taken into account during load calcs. Per the NEC code, you don't have to count 60 amps in your total load calcs for the 80% rule. With SPAN, as an energy management system, your installer will tag the EV charging breaker as sheddable, and will shed the breaker for you as needed if your home is going to go over its max capacity. So a simple on-off if it's a SPAN and a Tesla charger, for example. If you have the full SPAN system, a SPAN and a SPAN EV charger, rather than a 1-for-1 load shed, which is not always the best case for your situation, it will actually power throttle. So it's a dynamic charger. It'll move from 4 amps all the way up to 48 amps, depending on what's going on in your home. But if you're in a situation where maybe it's only 20 amps that puts you over your 80% rule, you'll have a full dynamic charge versus just losing your entire EV charger. So it's a little bit more of a flexible solution when your service size is constrained. But as EV charging grow, EV installations grow, as EV cars grow, and you have 2 of those, you may want 2 chargers for your home. This is really going to come into play so that you don't have to do an expensive service upgrade, which can, again, be costly or can just be time consuming depending on how the utility company is and how long they can take to get out to your home. So when you have EV charging installation coming up, think about SPAN depending on your situation. It may make it a little bit more flexible, quicker install, and in some cases, a less expensive install if you're talking service upgrades as well. So really flexible solution. And truthfully, for a lot of the homeowners that we do business with in the Northeast, this is one of the most common problems we're solving and why homeowners are getting SPAN versus the solar and battery setup, just in terms of, more homeowners are getting EVs today than they are solar and battery. Will that change in the future? Most likely. But that's the nuance of the Northeast versus, say, California, Arizona, Florida even. And when we recap a little bit of SPAN, right, we're really making our panel to get better use out of your electrification upgrades and your renewable upgrades. So we want to make a smarter, more energy efficient home. We want to give you the monitoring solution that you want as electric bills and rates rise. We want to give you that insight so you can make the correct decisions for your home. And we want to give you that control also for your home. Rather than having 6 different smart devices, we want to give you an entire smart home with everything tying into our system. And as we grow as a company, as we do more software updates, everything we do is an over-the-air update. So our panel is extremely overbuilt so that as we come out with solutions this year, next year, the year after, even our generation 1 panel can do everything our generation 2 panel. And we consider that kind of core to our belief system to make sure that hardware is one thing. We want all of our software to be backwards compatible. And as you make these updates to backup systems, whether it's battery or generator, you should really get the best use out of it because they are expensive installations. They're expensive products that you're putting in. You should have the most flexible solution possible. EV charging, right? You invest in an EV, you should be able to charge it faster, cleaner, smarter, and future with us during an outage so that you can utilize what you're storing with your battery. And again, all of this kind of tied into one app rather than having 4 or 5 different apps. Certain ones we can bring in, right? So solar, battery or generator systems, EV charging, all into one app. We know we're not covering maybe your Google Home app, your Lutron app, your Simply Safe app, but we're working to build in as much as we can into our system and looking into different APIs for whole home systems as folks realize that they want to bring, the 10 apps in their phone, into one app. So those are some of the things that we look for. And who should get Span, right? So we say anyone updating or upgrading their panel. It's a once in a lifetime update. You're most likely going to do it once in your life, hopefully, unless you move homes and you run into the situation again. I say anyone upgrading their panel, but really, I mean, anyone should look at this and consider it as they update their panel. If EV is not an interest to you, if solar battery is not an interest to you, it may not be the right solution for the cost. But in order to get the most out of your EV charging solution, to get the most out of your solar and battery, Span is a very good solution to enable just really the most flexibility, the most data, the most control out of those items. And there are, in those scenarios, cost benefits to using Span versus critical loads panel, versus derating a charger, versus doing a full service upgrade to enable full level 2 charging. And we'll look at further things down the road, like qualifying events we have at the bottom there, hot water heaters, heat pumps, pool saunas. How can we tie into those different items? Talked about EV charging, so I won't go into this too much, but I think it's pertinent for you guys is look at your panel, understanding what's available for you to charge at home, how much amperage you have available, and if not, take a look at Span and see if that can help enable the full level 2 charge. We get a lot of homeowners that purchase the car first, and this is holistically across the US. They get home, they have 100 amp service, they have 10 amps of availability to put a charger. Not a great experience to have essentially 3 days to charge your car. Not what you want after investing that in an EV. And maximizing your solar and battery investment, right? As that becomes more prominent, they're great solutions to curtail your electric bill. They're also just great for the environment, right? But optimize it the best you can. And this is where Span can take the place of things like critical loads panels to make it more flexible. And for us, it's really important, right? Summer outages versus winter outages. You don't want something tied that's a winter outage item in the summer or vice versa. Get the best experience, the most flexible experience, so that as things in your home change, family changes, you're set for those. I hate to call them natural disasters, but that's what they are with these extreme snowstorms, the hurricanes that come. This will really enable a flexible solution where you're comfortable with what's going to happen during an outage. I lost power Christmas Eve. Wasn't fun. Wish I had had a backup solution, right? Would have saved a little bit of food there for the family the next day. And we talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. You guys talked about at the beginning. This is something we're excited about. But I'll say from the Span side, this is what we've at a very high level digested. Always talk to your tax professional, your installer, about how to get the right paperwork to do this, but then also what you qualify for. So these are very high level, but this is what we've digested, which is pretty exciting for you guys. The 30% tax credit that you'd have with solar, you can now include a Span panel in that, which is great because most likely it's going to be over 25 to 30 years. So that $4,500 panel cost can get put over that lifespan with a 30% tax credit back, which is great. If you already have solar and you're adding battery, maybe you want to add a Span panel in conjunction with that, same deal, 30% tax credit put over the lifetime of what your solar company is financing with you. Really great solution to get extra tax credit back for that investment. If you're just doing a span panel, and this is really cool because Rewired America had a big hand in writing the bill. Very interesting website also to just take a look at holistically if you're interested in this stuff. You can get up to a $600 tax credit for your span panel, which every penny counts this because it is an investment without a doubt. So it's great that now this is being put in for those investments, that you can get some sort of tax credit back. Some of the other ones we see, and this is tagging as low to moderate income. So one of the things with this portion, right, this is all federal. Low to moderate income, we're understanding that that's going to be at the state level. So the state can choose to do it or not to do it. They can choose to ramp it down, or they can choose to add more to this. But what the initial bill states is that a low to moderate income, which is varied across state, region, county, you could get up to $4,000 for a rebate for a panel, which covers all but $500 of the material cost, and then $2,500 for installation. So on average, that can cover almost all of your span panel cost and installation cost. So that's a great one. Again, we have to see how the states activate that and how quickly that money's used up, but it's a very interesting one to definitely take a look at. And then the EV charging at home, $1,000 tax credit. That's a really great one. There's a lot of different incentives out there as you add your own EV charger. For us at Span and Connecticut in particular, we just got Energy Star certified, which is great to have in general for an EV charger. Our next step is to work with the likes of Eversource, UI, if there's anyone from Massachusetts National Grid, to have it on their approved list so that there's another incentive there. But Energy Star was our first box we had to check, which has some lead times to it. So that's been done. Our next step is to look at it at the more local level with those different utility companies. So we can add, again, another rebate or incentive for you to add, to get back, I should say, as you add Span and Span Drive, our EV charger. And we have a little custom calculator here that you can look at online. This is readily available on the Inflation Reduction Act or Rewiring America site. I'll say it's relatively accurate, but always check with your tax professional on what you're truly eligible for. But it gives you a good ballpark number. But we've seen in certain areas that it's not hyper accurate. So we say, take a look at it, play around with it, and then check with your tax professional. But overall, it's really exciting to see these ITC investment tax credits, the high efficiency electric home rebates, added into items like Span smart panels, EV chargers, holistically, so that these are expensive upgrades. It's good to have either a rebate or incentive back. And we see that as something very valuable. And we saw a number of homeowners kind of waiting for 2023 to tackle these projects because of these extra incentives that are available. And how to get Span right. If you go on our website, you'll see a get quote button, ton of other news, videos on our website, but really you'll click the get quote and you'll have a consultation with, in the Northeast, we will connect you with a Span installer to do your consultation, set up a site visit, and do your installation day. We do sell direct to consumers in 4 states, none of which are in the Northeast. So we rely very heavily on our network of licensed and certified electricians, one of which we have on the call, to go through and really, you come to us, we'll match you with the proper installer so that they're not 2 hours away from you, which a little bit impossible in Connecticut, pending traffic, I'll say. And they can really set up the next steps for consultation, site visit, installation day. And you'll fill out a really simple online form on our website that looks like that. Go through the items you want, the items you have, and we're turning that around, I'll say within 1 to 2 weeks to get you set up. Sometimes it's a day, just depending on demand. But I'll say we've seen such an increase that we have kind of a rework in our organization. I have one person solely focused on connecting homeowners that come through our system with their installers to make sure that we're keeping up with that demand. So we really value the homeowners coming to us, even though it's a very unique item, and getting them set up with the contractors respectively quickly, with contractors we trust that we know will do really good work. And I know I went through a lot there, but it sounds like we'll leave questions to the end. So appreciate everyone's time thus far.
Thank you so much, Corrigan. Yeah, one quick question came in about $1,000 incentive if someone already has an EV charger. So before we go over to David, if you could just maybe knock off that one question there from Marion. Go back one
Yeah.
slide if you could, or 2 slides, I think. There it is,
Certainly.
bottom right. Yeah.
So what we've understood from this thus far, and this would have to be a little bit vetted, is that because these are new for 2023, you can go back as long as it hasn't happened in 2023. So with many of these incentives, mainly this one, as we've talked to some like full service HVAC companies, is that you could do an install in 2023 and get a rebate. And as long as you do another one in 2024, you can actually get the rebate again. So they just have to be separated by a full calendar year. But if you didn't do an installation in 2023, you could go do another one and get that tax credit, if I'm answering that question correctly.
Yeah, I think so. And Marion, you're in the right-hand column there, where it says there will also be income restrictions where you gather, right, Corrigan? Yeah. And folks, I'm going through all of this right now with my tax preparer, trying to figure out what on earth do I do with a lot of HVAC equipment, insulation upgrades, and EV equipment, and span install all last year, 2022 for me. It will be interesting to do my tax return this year, to say the least.
Yeah. And I would say that Inflation Reduction Act has a lot in it. So it's worth a read if you really want to dig through. There's things like windows insulation, like you mentioned, that are covered in there. So it's pretty cool, but it's worth doing the digging to see what you may be able to get tax credit or rebate for holistically.
Okay, and John has a question about who installs it, but let's cut it over to David to explain that. But yeah, there's partners of Span that handle the install. This is not a direct sale thing, like you said, for the Northeast. Someone's asking if they can install it themselves if they're comfortable. Well, you kind of mentioned that in our state, you can't even buy it directly anyway. So I think that question's, you need an electrician here, right? Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, David is my electrician who I got connected to through Span. And again, David, off to you for giving the experience from an electrician point of view. And then I'll give the experience from a customer point of view. And that is, this video we were all recording tonight on Zoom is exactly what I desperately wanted last summer, where I was struggling a little bit to figure out, how do I make use of having access to a house for only 3 hours before closing September 1st in the end of July? Who on earth do I get there to actually pull off hitting the ground running and ripping out electrical and starting right away when I bought that house September 1st? It was a little crazy, a little tight for time, but David pulled it off by coming and seeing the house during that window and then arriving as he had promised to do all the work. So with that introduction, I threw some bullets in here to embarrass and annoy David, and that is, he does DC fast charging installations. Pretty cool. Who else would I want to trust with installing my EVSE, my electrical equipment for installing, charging my 2 cars? You know, Sandy Monroe and others have done videos about the dangers of poor wiring, or people doing their own NEMA 1450 outlets in their garage. Bad idea if you don't tighten it and torque it right. I felt a lot more comfortable with someone who does professional DC fast charging installs. He deals with a thick gauge cable at the public charging networks you guys are familiar with. Also Span certified, of course. Residential electrical, he also did for me a whole lot of outlets. Lutron, we went with a whole lot of Lutron cassette over Wi-Fi, so smart lighting. He was amazing at it. He turned 4-way switches into 3-way, automated it on my Wi-Fi. Boom, he's ready to the next switch, 10, 15 minutes later. I had so many switches in my 33-year-old house to replace. So I suspect a lot of you are in the same boat. And then finally, he's got a Rivian in order. So with that, David, off to you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, thanks for having me. So the first initial visit, once you do get a hold of Span, they contact me, and then I contact the homeowner, and I get, we meet up and go through the visit and fill out the site survey and take a lot of pictures of the panel and what you have for the service, and any future loads that you may be adding would be very helpful as well. And basically tell you what to expect and kind of go over all that and get a price together and hopefully come back to install. So yeah, so the pictures here is from the older panel that I took out of a house in Colchester. And it was a mess, basically. It's 100-year-old technology that's getting updated to the 21st century, basically. So there's a lot of work that's required in there. It looks like a mess, but it can definitely get much neater than that. So yeah, basically the panel itself is about 75 pounds, and it gets mounted on plywood. And normally that back plywood may have to be beefed up a bit to accept that panel, and screwed up on there. And then all the knockouts have to be drilled into that box, since it's a heavy steel, I don't know, about 3 mil thick. So it's a really nicely built panel.
David, that's outdoor rated. Is that part of why it's so thick? Because this thing go outdoors in some climates?
Yes, it has a NEMA 3R enclosure, and you can mount it outside in the basement on a panel surface mount, or they make a trim kit so you can flush mount it into a wall. So you can hide all those wires. If you have just a first floor cape with no basement, you can put it in there as well. So the integration from all the older circuits into the panel is very easy, and it takes numerous amounts of breakers. So I believe Siemens, Square D, Eaton, there might be one more there. And it takes an arc fault as well. And also one thing that I'd like to mention too is that it's 32 circuits that are controllable. So if you do have 42 or 44 circuits, you can tandem those down into one single breaker, but you will only see and measure those 2 circuits combined. It won't measure both circuits. So basically what I like to do is put all the lighting at the bottom, and I could group up those lighting, because you're not going to really need to measure all your different lighting loads. Basically to the connection, there's a wireless connection point, and there's also a hardwired connection point, and then there's a cellular network that it connects with. But the preferred method is to do a hardwired Ethernet, which would be shielded, because there's a lot of noise inside that panel. So a shielded cable does the job. Yeah.
On the next slide too, there we go. Corrigan showing on the next slide there, where David's photos in Colchester. Notice the internet's right there, and you're going to see something similar in my house. Yeah, and David's not kidding. I didn't use shielded wiring at first, and boy, oh boy, packet loss. It was acting pretty squirrely. It was just
it doesn't have to be right next to it. We can always run a wire to wherever it is, but it should be shielded. Yeah. So
and given my house, we were just moving in, right, and also disabling internet and pulling power, I wanted to make sure you're able to provision it, and that wasn't actually that big a deal. But for new construction, whatever, it's something to consider. You're going to want some sort of internet while your electrician is there, right, to get the thing brought up. Just something to ponder if you hadn't thought of that already. It is.
I mean, normally if you have cable internet or fiber, it normally comes in where the service is coming in anyways. So you can always put a switch there and jump off and, keep going down the line. Yeah. So the LED light inside is really nice and trick. And when I do the final setup, there's an app that I just scan the QR code, and it brings me right into the installer app, so I can label all the breakers inside there. So when I send you an email, you can open the app and all your breakers will be labeled, ready to go for you. And you could make changes there as well. And then the PDF is just emailed to you, so you could just print it out and slide it in the little sheath in the panel cover there. So it's a really great panel. I really like installing them, and they integrate great with Tesla Powerwall and all that stuff. So duration too. Basically, it all depends on if you need an upgrade or the quality of the meter socket outside and your drop. I mean, if you have 200 amps already, The load side of the meter socket may, the wire may need to get changed out, but you can basically leave all that there if it's in good condition and just change the panel out, which I did here in Colchester. And he was happy with that install there. So and that probably took about 6 hours, I believe, that install. So he was out without power for about 6 hours. So it wasn't too bad.
Similar in my house, right? From the day you actually cut over, you've done a lot of prep work, maybe 4 hours in my house. Yeah.
I did quite a bit of prep work for your house there.
Yeah, and the way my desk sharing is a little weird. Corey, if you can go back to page 20, that'd be cool. And David's got that bullet list there, right? David, one thing, so now we're kind of doing the span panel discussion, the three of us, and then we'll open it up to everybody for questions. So my question or comment to add to what David pointed out was part of the install process and arranging with David the visit. I'm not sure how all electricians do it. So I'll ask this question for both David and Corrigan, and that is, how do people handle the money part of it? Purchasing this panel. I don't think a lot of electricians would want to front, $4,500, right? That's the number you guys saw earlier in the deck there. That's, a significant investment. Now, what if the project falls through or you end up not installing it? Well, then an electrician has a span panel on their hands, right? So do all electricians handle it the same? Do you leave it up to them, Corrigan? And, with David, in my case, I paid up front, right? That just made sense. Typically, you're paying a contractor about 50% up front, 50% when they're done. Is everyone different on that, Corrigan? Or do you have any kind of rules from your perspective, from the company perspective?
Yeah. So as we were, I wouldn't say early days, but right, in the typical electrical world, you work with electrical distributors who are housing inventory for you for electricians to go pick up same day if needed, next day, however they see fit. Mid last year, we were selling direct. So yeah, it was kind of nuanced and difficult to work with for homeowners and installers because of the dollar value of our product. Now what's great for us in Connecticut is that we work with a large distributor in Rexel who stocks this product. So rather than pre-ordering it, 2-week lead time, paying up front, now it's stocked in local warehouses where it's a little bit easier for David to go pick up a panel. And also potentially just the way of payment there is easier than upfront payment for everybody, just because it is a high cost. So that's made it much more flexible for all installers in terms of installers and homeowners in terms of payments, but then also lead times. So that structure has changed even since you went through your process, Paul, which has helped us a lot just in terms of growing the business and an easier way of working.
Okay. And then a related question is lead times. That question for you both be for both of you. So for span, you have no trouble with keeping inventory, supply chain, all that good?
Thankfully for us, knock on wood, we have not been hit with any inventory issues or supply chain issues. We really beefed up and kind of over forecasted. But like I said, now that we work with local distribution houses to stock the product, they're transferred in from a central warehouse to in Connecticut. They come next day, essentially. So if David were to go to a Rexel and request one, if they didn't have one in stock, it's a day for them to transfer it. So our lead times are very, very good. Things can be turned around very quickly.
Okay. And David, how's your lead time as an electrician these days for trying to do a span panel install? Is it typically from first contact to install, like at least 2 weeks, 2 months? I don't know, just throwing it at you.
Well, depending on my schedule, but
exactly.
Yeah, so I would say from the initial visit to fitting me in would probably be about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then, I would just take the price of the panel alone, and then Rexel is about 10 minutes down the road for me, so I can have one next day and then, be on site ready to go.
All right. And then I'm going to, my last question is kind of a nerdy one, and that goes back to power and EVs. So in my previous house, which is in my same neighborhood, I had 2 Model 3s. My town inspector and the electrician basically said, yeah, the most you can do is 100 amp sump panel, 250 amp breakers, 40 amp max. So they're derated a little bit. Exactly what Corrigan was talking about, right? Didn't really have a choice. That's what was getting improved by my inspector. That's what I rolled with. Moving to the other house, that was one of the appeals of span panel. Like, oh, I could do 60 breakers for both cars. because I don't know what I'm going to own 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. I would like 48 amps, please, right? I knew I eventually want solar and some sort of battery storage. Check, right? This product's ready for that. And then in the next part of the deck, you'll see, took it even further. David did a great job, prepping the house, getting ready for those next steps, assuming, and hopefully they get approved, fingers crossed. So in my background, you'll see 2 cars with the glowing green. They're both charging at once. Didn't need to worry about it. But my nerdy question for both of you would be, I don't have battery backup. I don't have solar yet. So really the app, the SPAN app, it's awesome. It has a lot of features, but it doesn't let me say something like, what happens if I overload my house, right? I charge both cars, turn on the oven, throw on the washing machine, the dryer. That's a little crazy. We can easily go into 30,000 watts at once, right? So Corrigan, you're nodding your head. What happens in that circumstance, right? I haven't done any prioritization of circuits and said what's necessary yet. Right now, it's just all lit up. You said the laws are, it's no problem. It'll pass inspection. You can do 60 amp breakers for each car. Cool. But what actually happens if I do that? I think I know the answer is just the breakers, just good old fashioned breakers do their thing. It's got nothing to do with the relays that are in the SPAN panel. And I don't know if that word relay came up, but that's how you do your thing in software. I click on relays to turn off circuits. It doesn't physically move the knob on the breaker. Just so everyone attending understands that nuance there.
Yep, and that's correct. So we do not physically, if you turn off a circuit from your home, from your home app, the breaker will not flip off. That's for from a safety perspective. We don't want to do that in case anything ever got stuck on or off and someone was doing work. So when you turn off a circuit in your home app, one, you'll get a notification saying, please go flip your breaker off if you're doing electrical work. But that is us essentially stopping power flowing from your Romex or your wiring through your home to that breaker. But in the case of your EV charging, right? So NEC is the National Electric Code that I mentioned earlier. Rules and regulations of what can and can't be done within a home. Because of our energy management listing, they state that the breakers within your panel, so the 60 amp breakers, don't have to be taken into the load calculations. So you can do 80% of 200 amps. During installation, so when David is going through in his installer app, you would tag the EV chargers as sheddable items. So like you're saying, Paul, it's 5 o'clock, TVs are going, laundry's going, cooking's going. SPAN will actually sense the amount of amps running through the panel and shed the EV chargers if it deems it's going to go over its 80% of 200 amps. You will get a notification on your phone saying that SPAN has shed your EV chargers. And once the home calms down, your EV charge, you'll get a notification that your EV charger has come back online. David could probably speak to a little bit better how often your home is really fully loaded, because it may really never hit that threshold depending on what's happening within your house. But it's meant, out of an abundance of caution that you do not overload your home or your panel and brown anything out.
Yep. And the good old fashioned 200 amp breaker will trip if I really overdo it, right? I mean, it's the same protection you always have.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's brand agnostic, as David mentioned. It's many brands of breakers. Cool. Because I think different towns, the inspector might have preference of breakers. There's all these different things where you live, right? But this handles all of them. So that's cool. Thank you. And Corey, if you could jump to my part of the deck, we have people itching to ask questions, like 4 or 5 queued up. That's awesome. My section will be pretty quick here. So, yeah, that's me. Many of you already know me, but the stuff I blog about, PCs, EVs, home tech efficiency, those are sustainable themes, right? People are moving, not just computers, but dealing with the stuff in their home to make it more efficient. So things like hot water systems, right? Going electric. So when I said I ripped out gas, that meant, oh, I guess I need to ask the HVAC crew for a 30 amp breaker for that water heater that you see there in the left that I'm talking about in the middle picture. And then finally, nerdy things like tires for your EV and stuff, or things I enjoy talking about. So moving into this 33-year-old home, you've all heard the story already, getting ready. Let's go to also the one topic I didn't cover, just improve power management during outages. That's key. Like, how many batteries or how much capacity do I buy during a backup? Well, in my old house, I had 8 breakers I had to pre-allocate and set aside for my manual switch over to my gas power generator I wheel out to the backyard and run in a pinch, right? And Corrigan, who lived near me in West Hartford, I'm in Wethersfield, we've had some long ones, especially many years ago, that October storm, between 6 and 8 days, right? That really is a wake-up call. This house, it's like, oh, wouldn't it be awesome if in software I just take out the SPAN app and go right ahead and reprogram it right there. And that's really cool, changing what circuit is important to me, just like Corrigan said, and here's what the app looks like. And whoops, it's a little weird with the blank. There you go. All my circuits labeled. I can easily move that around during an outage and manage the house's power out. That is a big plus right there. And the wiring was so nasty in my other house. So let's advance to the next deck. You'll see the before and after in the wiring. Okay, this one actually shows some of those breakers I was talking about. And this is one of the big lessons I learned. Putting in 2 heat pumps could require as many as 6 circuit breakers. Now, in my case, after talking to my HVAC crew, it looks like I might be able to cut back to 4, and David and I will talk about that, but your house may vary. It will vary. Your electrician talking to your HVAC crew is important, and I mentioned that already. Let's go to the next slide. But that shows basically my circuit breaker. Okay, this one I talked about a little, and Corrigan, you asked, a little product feedback. Well, here's how I moved some of my electric equipment. And when having the conversation with David, let's cover bullet 1, how I moved some of my equipment. Old house at the left, large garage. Newer old house that's 33 years old on the right, tight garage. So Tesla Powerwalls were down to $400, and now they're down to $350 actually since then. Instead of putting in a NEMA 1450, which you see in the left-hand picture on the wall there, gets a little cluttered and it's just another point of failure and another thing that can heat up in the long term. You're better off at this point if you can just get a wall charger for whatever brand of car, just have it hardwired and home run right to your circuit breaker panel. And that's what David did here. Now, Corrigan, you're wondering why it's not a span drive unit on my walls. It's partly because it's so narrow between my 2 cars there that I'd be walking into that Model 3 charging, the gray Model 3 on the left. The J1772 connector sticks out a bit. Sounds like a small nitpicky thing, but I actually hang my wires from the ceiling. This is a little older picture. So it's a subtle thing, Corrigan, but yeah, if there was more of a right angle on the J1772 connector you use, then I'd happily use that in my garage. Because then, like Corrigan said, I could say, hey, when I get solar, hopefully someday, just charge my car from Sunbeams, please. When I drive to visit my kids in New York or Boston from here in central Connecticut, that is a cool goal. Now, for now, it'll be manual, right? I'll need to tell my Teslas when to charge, so I know they're actually getting power from eventual solar. And that's about it. So yeah, thank you. Perfect. A lot of outlets to change. Boy, was it handy to be able to turn off circuits without running back and forth into my basement. Even though it's a 1-level house I'm now on, it's in the far corner of the basement, and it was really handy. Now, Corrigan, you might be cringing thinking, yeah, you're really supposed to turn off the physical breaker. The SPAN app warns you of that. He's nodding his head. These are not high voltage circuits, not a big deal, but I have a tester, as David knows. I can test the circuit, see my little light go off as soon as I flick it off in the app. And it's as easy as tapping the little switch slider right there. You tap it, boom, it goes off. My tester in my hand would stop beeping and glowing. I'm now safe. But again, technically, you're supposed to run to the basement and flip off all the breakers. All right, next. I already drive this point home. Oops. Your HVAC person, bullet 2 there, has to talk to your electrician. That's a careful, coordinated effort between the 2 of them. David knows why I'm saying this. We had some challenges there. Heat pumps, all that stuff. This is something about aux heat too. So yeah, your system might need 10 or 50, you might need 1 or 2 resistive heating elements, depending upon your HVAC design. That plays into what an electrician like David would have to do and how many wires they have to run to the panel. And copper is expensive, so you want to get all that right in advance. Next, I already covered that in the previous slide. The following one is Leviton whole surge suppressor. All right, you saw that in Colchester, you saw that in my house. David, is Leviton a popular brand, or do you have customers asking for all different surge suppressors? And then Corrigan, a follow-on question. Would you ever build a surge suppressor into your product, or you'd rather not, because that means you now have to replace the unit when lightning hits nearby, right? So maybe you prefer that to be outside your box. I guess that question's for both of you.
I believe the Leviton surge suppressor is a really good unit. I've used it several times. Also, Eaton makes a really good designed one, as well as most of the breaker manufacturers also make a clip-in one that will just clip right into the bus of the panel. And that's a really good option as well.
Okay. And I had the
Yeah.
same unit. It lasted 20 years with the green light still glowing from my old house. So Corrigan, that's not something you probably put in your product, or I don't know if you can speak for Span on that.
Yeah, nothing we have in it today, mostly because from Connecticut to Florida to California, you can imagine differences in weather, differences in requirements for surge protection. So one size fits all solution is actually pretty tricky. We're in early stages of development of our next generation panel, something we're actively looking at it because it does come up often. But it's one of those solutions of how do you tackle multiple regions with multiple codes and local requirements. So tricky, but we're gonna do a best effort to look into it and see what we can do there.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's just something I brought up as a bullet here for people to think about that I had forgotten to think about until the last minute. And that is you're putting in many thousands of dollars of heat pumps that are going to be cooling and heating your house if you're going all electric like me. And you kind of want to protect or to have some sort of ability to do an insurance claim, maybe beyond your homeowners. Because if that stuff gets zapped, it'd be pretty pricey if you have a high copay like I tend to keep on my homeowners. All right. And then finally, voltage sags. I know some other people right here in Connecticut that have similar issues in the rural part of Connecticut. I'm not rural at all, but I still have voltage sags. So that happens when a neighborhood gets built up. The transformer never gets upgraded necessarily. And David's actually working with me on some new wiring that's working with Eversource on that. So just something to be aware of, that if someone like David or electricians come in your house, maybe have them look at your meter socket. David dealt with that for my older house, and your wiring that goes across the street. Have a look at all of it so you're less surprised when you actually move into the house and the electrical work begins. All right, next slide. Tips, yeah. Networking, shielding, we talked about that. And having it nearby is kind of handy, but not necessary, as David mentioned. And then finally, be sure to label the circuits as you do electrical work. So I had 27 outlets that were backwired in my house. So as that work was proceeding, I made sure to label circuits like northeast, southwest corner of a bedroom, whatever. I kind of went a little nuts on that, but it sure makes it awesome that I kind of finally have pretty granular level of knowing how to turn off a particular outlet. Next slide. Here come the pictures. There we go. So I do have 200 amp service, not the kind of a blurry picture on the right, but this is my 33-year-old home. An alarm system shown on the left. I needed to rip that panel off and get that out of David's way. Coax cable, ripped that off the bottom. I prepared the whole area and seal coated the whole wall. On the right, you will see a 200 amp breaker, the top right, but boy, that's not nearly enough breaker spots. Span had more breaker spots, but not a lot more. But we'll talk about that in the next pictures. So next slide. Here we go. David doing his thing, kind of spaghetti working on the left. He's in the middle of it, and he's actually got the span on the wall there. And then finally, I'll play a little. Can you hit the play button briefly? It's just a 10-second video.
Yep.
So there's me prepping the site, right? Just getting the stuff out of David's way so that he's ready to put the 4x8 panel up. And he starts with studs that are pressure treated in the wall. There's me seal coating the wall for my wife. He got the wall seal coated, and boom, there's his nice quality wood that he's going to silver paint, ready with the old panel. So that last slide showed everything that went into getting ready for this. Now, David had some coordination with the HVAC crew, like, how do we light up heat pumps if the span panel's not ready? There was definitely some back and forth in creative scheduling, and that's, again, a consideration. Might be really hard to get both your HVAC crew and your electrician perfectly scheduled aligned. If you're trying to do what we're doing, and that is move in the house in 3 weeks, it was really tight, I would say. We only owned the 2 homes for 3 weeks nearby each other, and it was difficult. We moved in without heat or air conditioning the first 3 nights, but we pulled it off, and it was October, and that was quite bearable. Next slide. Just things to consider you might not have thought about. Oops, playing back again. And we're coming in the home stretch there. So here's the go. I think you might have skipped one. No, okay. Oh, never mind.
There we go.
There we go. So in the middle of doing the work, you'll see some wires are going to come up short. So David, you have no choice but to do a few splices, but very minimal in my case. You pulled out extra slack where you could. You mounted it fairly high in the wall. It worked out beautifully. My old house had so many splices from 27 years of history of adding circuits. This thing is gorgeous. Notice in the photo on the right, that large, thick loop. David, can you take that on and explain, if I get some sort of product from a third-party company that does solar and electric, you left that loop there for whatever I get so that they don't have to pull a new wire from my span panel to the brand new meter socket you installed, correct?
Yes. So in this circumstance, yeah, there's going to be a gateway out by the meter socket outside. So I made provisions with a big loop. So the solar company that does come to do the potential install won't have to go into the span panel and wreck up my nice, neat work in there. So they'll be able to pull that loop out to get it to the gateway without having to go into the span panel. So that's just a little provision for, keeping everything neat.
Thank you so much for covering that. And you'll see I had foam insulation at the end of those joists there. You get a lot of leakage in an older home. Eventually I'll probably insulate, but even handle that. And then I got a battery temporarily running my stuff until I get full battery backup. That's running my internet. But as David pointed out, this thing is smart. This span panel will cut over from wired Ethernet, which it's got right there with a shielded cable. It'll cover to Wi-Fi if need be. For some reason, my switch on the right there that's glowing green died. And then it'll cover to cellular if all fails. Pretty cool. I'm a little unclear on Corrigan. I guess you guys are just some sort of 4G connection for life that I don't need to worry about. I mean, someone's paying for a little bit of data there, and I guess that's built into the cost, right?
Yeah, built into the product cost. Think of it as a fail-safe if you were to lose internet. So Comcast, Verizon, whoever your internet provider is, goes out, but your power's still on. You have that AT&T 5G cellular to continue data logging and act as your internet ad interim. So a little fail-safe, no subscription fee, just built into the overall product cost.
Perfect, because I figured someone would about to ask that, right? Is there a monthly bill to have a span panel? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
And then the last slide, I think the last slide here coming up. There we go, before, after, and then the prettier shot on the right. So that shot on the right has the panel cover on. That's what it looks like, and it actually alerts me when the panel's left open and you got the lights illuminated and the pretty managed wires. Next slide. There's the app. So if we do take a moment to share my desk, if time permits, maybe I'll leave my phone running during the Q&A. We'll share my desk. I've got a way to basically mirror my phone to my desktop, and then we'll share out my desk on Zoom. Let me just set that up as we open it up to questions. So now's a good time for people to unmute as needed, but actually, we're not ready to unmute yet. We got to go through the questions queued up. Corrigan, most of these questions are for you.
Sure.
If you could scroll back about a page or two in the chat. Let's start with Paul Stansel, who is not sure it'd be worth it because he already has solar. So he's trying to see if this would be worth it. Maybe if you could ask Paul Stansel a pointed question or two about what he has and see if there's value added to trying to retrofit what he already has. So do you see that? That was at 7:31 p.m. He asked that. That'll help find it in the chat there. While you're doing that, I'm setting up the screen sharing here. And you guys can have a live look and have me tap on stuff in the SPAN app. Not just the simulator, which is awesome, that Corrigan mentioned, but also, my actual house and what's happening live. There we go. There's my app.
He did ask at 7:59 if you could put his 100-amp Ford Lightning charger into the SPAN panel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is a good question and comes up often. Today, our branch breakers have a 90 amp max rating. So for 100 amp charger, we're going to be a little bit shy there. So that will have to be slightly derated. But again, during the most, integral portions of development, 60 amp breaker needed for a charger was the max that we see on the market today. As we see things like the Ford Lightning charger come out, again, batteries powering houses, our generation 3 panel is something we'll look at to accept things like that. But today that have to be slightly derated just because of our max breaker rating of 90 amps.
Awesome. Thank you. And let me, I'm sharing my screen, so I'm having a little difficulty bringing up chat. I need to pop it out into a separate window. So hang on a second. There we go.
I know I haven't installed the Ford Lightning charger or the Lucid one, but I know that very rarely does it ever draw 100 amps entirely. You're making that provision for the chance that it may, but most of the time it's about 80% of the, so I mean, it would be probably 80 amps if you were to measure amperage there, but
okay.
But you still can't put the 100 amp breaker in there though, only 90 amps. So,
all right, next question. Larry Schwartz would love us to cover SPAN subpanels. I think you can maybe both chip in on that because I know David and I talked about that a lot too. Who wants to take that one first? Talk about subpanels or buying a second SPAN versus just getting a done subpanel, right?
Yeah, I'll talk to just some of the nuances of that quickly and then kind of have David talk through what he's done.
Awesome.
There's a few different ways around it that have different budgets, right? So if budget is not a problem, right, you can actually use 2 SPAN panels in parallel. One is your main panel, and you can use a second SPAN panel as a sub panel, either fed off of a branch breaker or using the feed through lugs. If you have 2 SPAN panels, you'll get 64 data points, right? So expensive cost, but you'll get the most data and control out of that. Typically what we're seeing homeowners do is that's a very expensive solution. So you could run a traditional sub panel off of a branch breaker and you'll get a single data point for that, but you just use low use circuits, unfinished areas of the home, outlets, etc. Or you could use twin breakers that have multiple circuits on it. So those are kind of the three that vary in cost that we do today. But our panel is a flexible solution where you could use it as a sub panel if you wanted to. It's just really a matter of cost and, David, probably complexity as well, and install cost as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, putting in the sub panel is definitely needed, and I've done that. You only get the data points on just the 2-pole breaker that you put in that feeds the sub panel. But most of the time, if you in that sub panel, there are some critical loads, we can always take those out and run them directly to the sub panel, the span panel. And if the sub panel is going right next to the span panel, then you could just dump in a bunch of non-critical loads, or loads that you don't need to control with the span panel. It's a pretty good option to do. And it also has those feed through lugs, which are rated for a bigger wire. So you could put a 40 circuit panel next to that if you wanted to. That would have another breaker in the sub panel to control that as well.
Yeah, and you can see some of that going on in here. Let me make this bigger and let's zoom in. So here's some of what David's talking about, that there's a metal piece holding these 220 amps together, for example.
Handle tie, yeah.
Handle tie, thank you for the right term. Mm-hmm. Yep. So he has a lot of double poles down here where it's just like bedroom 1, bedroom 2. It doesn't really matter to me to be able to monitor them separately. They're just grouped. No big deal. But great question, Larry Schwartz.
That was a packed panel, that one there.
Yep. So that's the product feedback. And I know you've been asked that already, Corrigan, but hopefully your company at some point will come up with one with more units, so people don't necessarily really feel like buying another one. They'd rather just buy one with more breaker spots. It's 32 right now, correct?
32, correct. Yep.
32, yep. Okay. John Day asks, is it a smart breaker or is there a relay in addition to the breaker? Okay, cool. I think I anticipated that question earlier. You hear a little relay click from your basement if you're kind of near it. It's not very loud, but it's definitely a relay that's behind the breaker that trips when I use software to turn off a circuit. So John Day, yep, the physical breaker, the lever stays right where it was. It doesn't physically move.
Yeah, we use traditional branch breakers, which is great for supply chain and cost, right? There's no unique breaker that you have a very specific item that has to go with span, which is nice because you also, depending on where you live in your inspector, could reuse some branch breakers if available and you have newer ones. And you can also mix and match depending on, again, what's going on in terms of brands. But you see in that picture, the black area in that panel, that is what we call our gateway or our computer. That's where we're talking at the relay level, doing the monitoring and control. The reason we do that is because from a data accuracy standpoint, it's utility grade. So utility companies can actually, and in some cases do, use our panel to monitor homeowners' homes if they give them access. But then we can turn them on and off. So with other competitor panels, and this is no knock, it's just a different use case, you can turn a breaker off, but you cannot turn it back on. You'd have to physically walk downstairs. So by us doing things at the relay level, more accurate data, easier supply chain, and then you can actually open and close the relay to turn on and off power.
And when you say black area, you're talking about around here?
That entire piece. Yeah, we call that kind of the back plate internally in our engineering team, but really that is the computer of the panel, right? It's the entire
relay. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Entire brain.
The relays are back here behind, right behind their corresponding breaker, but the kind of mini motherboard, I guess, would be up here probably, right?
Right.
Just yep. Another bit of product feedback too, a little tight there with Ethernet. When you leave slack in these wires, gets a little tough.
Yeah.
There's also a direct Ethernet for folks that are thinking about Tesla Solar or similar. You get a direct comms cable that connects one right to the other cord, and you're nodding yes, right? So there's a second cable coming out the side, and David already made a hole in that in the span for that at that later date.
Yeah, and kind of an interesting bit because you talked about it with the loop earlier. Solar's down the road or scheduled. It is really good, and if you're getting solar and battery, to put your span panel in first. Like David said, you can intercept that main power and run everything into the gateway, which saves you some breaker slots. But then from a commissioning standpoint, it's just much easier to have that panel installed ahead of time. And our span tech support team can actually do some of those integrations from our office if your solar provider is not a span installer, which is also nice. We have the ability to go into the homeowner's panel as they give us approval to fix anything or add anything down the road.
Okay, looks like the last question before we ask people to unmute and verbally ask their questions. The last typed in question in chat is Stephen Lyle asking, when does the newest span panel hit the market? I don't know. Futures. Yeah.
Good question, because I did mention it. Very early stages. So sometime in 2024, best case scenario. Really what we're doing this year is we know we have a very good hardware product that has some fixes in terms of breaker slots and overall wiring spacing. But there's so much we can do on the software side that's going to be our focus for 2023, is adding things like anomaly detection, different software like charging when you have a span EV charger, charging via solar, charging during an outage. Scheduling is coming soon, little sneak peek there. So really fine tuning what we can do from a software perspective, because there is so much more we can add in terms of homeowner value of what they can do within their home app. So that's our big focus for 2023.
Okay, so yeah, folks, you can see my app on the left. Feel free to unmute, ask your question, or ask me to tap on something you'd like to see in the app that's running live here. The stats I find particularly good. There's my HVAC. It's 2/3 of my house is HVAC in January, right? Love that. So my circuits are dedicated for HVAC. I know what all my HVAC is: air handlers, heat pumps, all of that is in that cluster. Corrigan, I think by telling one of the circuits it's my water heater, that's how you figure out what's part of that. I'm not really sure if heating is including my water heater in that graph. Do you happen to know, I give it category. I tell it, here's the circuit and here's what the device is, and I pick water heater from your list. Does that then mean it says, okay, well, that's part of his HVAC system, or is water heater considered separate?
No, it's considered into HVAC and cooling.
Nice.
And we've built in some of those pre-groups so that you can see like lighting and outlets, because everything in there is you put the high level circuit data or items within there, are all drop downs, right? So you can type things in and make up stuff as you see fit, but we've put in enough of those items in there. And we have a whole data science team that kind of builds in those programs and algorithms to know when you tag something, what group it should go into.
Cool. And here's the fancy UI, go to a week or month. It gets a little more interesting when I say a month, because now you can see my EV charging. Transport, 13%. There was a couple of Boston and New York trips in there, right? I charged at home. Pretty cool. And we go back to last year. There's history. We can jump to circuits. So yeah, questions, folks. Anyone have questions for any of us? Now's your chance. Thank you for staying on all the way to the end. We appreciate it. This is cool. Feel free to ask your questions of other attendees too, whose names you might remember or might already know here. I'm looking at who's still on.
So I guess I had a question. This is John Day. How does the SCCR or AIC rating, is it affected by that intermediate relay as it feeds the breaker?
Maybe just repeat that real quick so I could understand a little bit better.
Sure. So there's like amps interrupted current or AIC rating on your breakers, right? So I think a standard breaker comes in at like 5K, or, when you get into the 2-pole, that might go up into a 10K rating. You mentioned that you had like an upstream relay or whatever. I was just wondering, does that have an effect on the AIC or SCCR ratings?
No, really what we're doing at that relay level is opening and closing it. Essentially, if it's closed, there's power going to it. When we open it, there's no power going to it. So there's no differences in the breaker styles going in there, and what it has in terms of an impact on the relay, or vice versa.
It's just the switch that's, before the circuit that's being protected. So it doesn't affect the trip ratings on the breaker at all.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else think of any questions as you're pondering, I'll be publishing a replay of this Zoom. I have a little bit of editing to do. And I'll be publishing the deck very soon, like tonight. That should be easy enough. I'll throw that on my site. Barry, if you could unmute, do you have a way to publish it too? You plan to put it somewhere on the EV Club website as well? I mean, the Zoom is easy enough. We'll put that on the YouTube channel for the club, but how about the actual?
Yes, I can.
The actual deck. Cool. You'll throw it in there. So, okay, cool.
Yeah, I might have to turn it into a PDF, but yeah.
Yeah, I can send you, no problem. It'll be an 18 meg PDF, so a little beefy on the web server. I might need to think about how I get that to you, but all right.
Okay, well,
because the pictures are kind of the fun part, right? If I blur them, I'll figure it out. I'll use Dropbox or something. Yeah, because the pictures, it's nice to keep them high resolution so people can actually see them rather than blur them all. Any other questions for any of us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Richard Moss, excuse me. Question for our electrician. I see at the end he is buying a Rivian. Or he
Yes.
hopes to.
Yeah, I hope
bought-
to.
I bought a Rivian truck in 2022, and I found that my solar definitely does not cover my electric needs now with a EV. Would this help me try to monitor my usage somehow?
Absolutely. You could, well, especially if you go to the span drive, you'll be able to ramp it down so you can, cover with the solar, especially during the day, or, and then ramp it back down during the night type of thing. And it would just give you better data points so you can see what your consumption is. So you could shed load in other places to charge your car, and then, turn those loads back on when you're done.
All right, because like I say, I have it scheduled to start charging after midnight. So basically nothing else is running in the house.
And it's just over capacity.
Oh, way over capacity. I have what, let's see, I'll be on 8 years solar, and 4 months out of the 8 years, I had to pay more than $9.53. Now, this last bill was $257 charging the truck.
Okay. And you're
So-
charging it at 60 amps?
Well, only 48, right? It's 60 amp
Yeah.
charge.
Sure.
you only-
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So other than putting some more solar panels on the roof, which does not look practical because of Eversource, that looks the only solution. If I was able to do that, then I think maybe with this unit, I could probably monitor my usage better.
Yeah, you might have some phantom loads, during the night that you're not aware of, and the span panel can, locate those and let you know what's
Okay.
going on there.
Okay.
Like I said, just better data points on your system.
All right. Well, good luck with your Rivian.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Looks like there's one more question that came in, Paul, so I'll just answer that quick. It was, can the panel give access to power companies to qualify for rebate programs? So we do that with a few different utility companies, one in California. The closest to us is Green Mountain Power up in Vermont. Long Island, I think, has one coming very shortly. It may have already started, or it's next month. Unfortunately, Eversource, UI, again, if anyone's like National Grid up in Massachusetts or Rhode Island, don't do anything like that yet. But I'll say we're hopeful that it's something more utility companies do in the future. Again, they'll do very similar to what they do with if you have a Google Nest thermostat today, do some load shedding and control, and you might get a rebate or a discount on a panel cost, essentially in the form of a rebate. So definitely things that we've started to do. Hopefully that expands more, because I think it's a good use case and opportunity for homeowners to get rebates from their utility companies. So something very good to do. And obviously, if you have solar and battery, you are able to store a little bit more of your excess solar in your battery if those buyback programs aren't available, and then utilize it, charge your car with Span. So different use cases there, but hopefully those programs with the utility companies continue to expand, and hopefully we get one in Connecticut soon.
Yeah, it's a great question too.
Mhm.
For instance, hybrid electric heat pump based water heaters. There's a little interface, a little jack in there to jack in your utility basically and let them opt in and curtail you at certain peak hours, kind of
Yeah.
like you can do for cars. We talked about that in prior EV Club phone calls. Imagine if the span panel could have that sort of capability for a variety of things in the future. Just a little bit of future proofing. So I like that idea. And here, the previous person was asking about, the Rivian, and here I can see exactly what that car that I park in that spot is using, as I just told it to charge 11,000 watts right now, right? The full 48 amps sustained on a 60 amp breaker, perfectly safely charging it. And I can go back in time and have a look. Here's what it looks like, my energy use over time for that car at all the stats. So that would help me figure out, okay, that's about how many kilowatts I charge that car that drives a fair amount back and forth. Sounds like the person with the Rivian drives a fair amount too, right? Based on what he was saying for kilowatts used. But this helps you, right? Like this is the first step in my house to know, what am I up against if I do get solar and battery? What I need? I now have 3 months living here and I'm starting to get some data thanks to this product, right? Show me circuit by circuit what's going on. So I think that was our last question. Any other questions on the Zoom? Okay, sounds like there's one question. John Day. For the conversion, did you have to update the breakers to AFCI, DFCI, or GFCI? David?
That's a negative. Only if you're moving the panel 6 feet or more is when you'd have to install the code required arc fault breakers. And if it's a GFCI protected breaker, originally it would stay a GFCI protected breaker going forward. So yeah, only 6 feet or more for those.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Looks like with that, we're bringing this evening to a close. I'll go ahead and stop the Zoom recording at this point and hand it back to you, Barry. If you have any parting comments there, let me hit stop.
Well, thanks everyone for who hung in for the full duration. If you have follow-on questions that you think of afterward, please email them to the club. evclubct@gmail.com, and we can follow up and get back to you.